All right. Thank you to the World Government Summit team. And hello, everyone. Today we have Dr. Parag Khanna, the managing partner and founder of FutureMap. And today we'll be discussing how can governments, organizations navigate 2021. Of course, 2020 was quite a disruptive year for all. I believe it is one of the universal aspects that have disrupted all life on the planet. And today it is vital for organizations and in particular governments to understand how can they navigate through 2021 and allow them to plan a better 2022. Parag, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Saeed. It's an honor to be back and join the World Government Summit again. And thank you so much for inviting me and being able to host this important global event virtually this year. It's itself a sign of your ability to cope with the disruptions that this year or last year has brought upon us. So our theme is navigating the post-pandemic world. And indeed, it's a time of such great uncertainty. But what I want to present to you today are the areas where I feel we can be relatively confident and robust in our view of what trends lie ahead. So let me begin by talking about what has happened in the broader Asian region, where surprisingly to many, given that the pandemic originated in this region in China, the economic rebound has been strong, governments have remained in place and maintained high trust, and all of those sort of outcomes that were unexpected. So let me go into a bit of detail on that. First of all, we cannot paint Asian governments with one broad brushstroke. There are one-party states, there are liberal democracies, there are also technocratic states, but almost all of them, managed COVID better than most of the rest of the world. And I think that's really revealing about the cultural underpinnings, the degree of trust in government, the strong public institutions, and the social cohesion that is present in Asia. Moving forward, one thing is for sure, everyone in the world will be studying these diverse forms of Asian governments much more carefully than they have in the past. And when they do, I believe that they will come to realize that there are three of what I call the new Asian values. And these apply across many states and cultures. Again, Asia is a very broad geography. It covers everything from the West Asian region, where the Arab Gulf countries are, all the way to Japan, from Russia to Australia. This is the mega region that encompasses nearly 4.5 billion people. So even though I'm generalizing, you find these attributes quite present across different cultures and types of governments. The first of these new Asian values is what I call technocratic governance, which is a hybrid kind of regime in which not only is there a strong public authority, but there is also a use of data more and more to understand and collect and harness public sentiment to steer policies aimed at national modernization. And this is backed by a meritocratic and independent civil service, emphasis on the rule of law, and on low corruption. The second is what I call mixed capitalism. Here, what we see across Asia is a high share of the government role in the economy, which is very different from the laissez-faire free market orthodoxy. Instead, what you see is that governments play an active role in industrial policy, supporting national champion firms, and stimulating the economy when needed, and certainly providing for the SMEs and common citizens. And the third is what I call social conservatism. And this is about being incremental in one's approach to liberalization rather than allowing a free-for-all, whether in public space and political discourse, or indeed in the internet and in cyberspace. I also believe that it's important in the social realm to focus on the empowerment of women, on emphasizing coherent national education and values, and, as I mentioned before, in regulating the public space so that opinions can be voiced, but the collective stability is not disturbed. And again, one finds variations to a greater or lesser degree of these three new Asian values quite prevalent across the broader Asian region. Again, here is a map showing you this great Asian geography, as I mentioned before, that does contain the majority of the world's populations. And one of the other trends that I find very robust, that predates the pandemic and certainly will outlast it, is the growing connectivity between West and East Asia. I call this the Iron Silk Roads, but it's also the Digital Silk Road. It's also the Green Silk Road. It's all of the new kinds of exchange of commerce, whether it's energy, transportation, infrastructure, investment, services, finance, the movement of people and workers. All of these things are occurring more and more within this space. And let's remember that as we prepare for the post-pandemic world, you will see a return of migration. And one of the things that was really halted, of course, in 2020 was the mobility of people, but that will come back. And what we'll find is a flight to stability. People wanting to be in places that have proven themselves to be stable in terms of their healthcare, in terms of their openness, in terms of protections of citizens, the ability to manage a lockdown while also having the connectivity so that people in the services economy or remote workers could continue to thrive. So one example of a country that's done that is certainly the United Arab Emirates. And within that, what we've seen is that Dubai has been elevated in its ranking among global cities over the last several years. Here I'm showing you some of the measurements that are used to rank global cities according to their role in the global flows of goods, services, capital, people, and data. And we're accustomed to seeing New York and London and Singapore and Hong Kong on these lists. But also now we have Dubai and Shanghai also on those lists. And what have they done well? What has Dubai done well? Well, certainly expanding its reach in terms of the connectivity of transportation infrastructure, airlines, logistics networks, becoming more of a smart city, right? Boosting the role of the knowledge industries, media, finance, entertainment, and so forth. And investing in technology ecosystems, making itself a test bed, if you will, for the latest in technology. And now, gradually, as a result of the recognition it's received, exporting that model, with many countries in the developing world looking up to the trends that they see playing out in global cities like Dubai. Let's talk about the internal priorities of governments post-pandemic. Becoming a smart city, a sustainable city, a green city, or a healthy city. What are some of the requirements there? Well, one is becoming more sustainable in terms of energy, being self-sufficient, using alternative energy, solar, for example, and having the grids distribute that energy in an efficient fashion. Having multimodal transportation systems, public transportation that is robust and widely available, but also private transportation that is based on renewable power, electric cars, for example. Also, localized food production. We are seeing the smart governments today recognizing that with the risk of the cutoff of food supply chains, they must grow their own food and, if needed, use technology like hydroponic and aquaponic food production to increase their domestic production. It means efficient building design, green buildings. It means walkable communities, mixed use, residential and commercial. And it also means a broader sensor-driven environment in which public safety, in which access to public information is available on citizen dashboards, and of course, connectivity for each and every individual to access those services and to flourish professionally. So which places in the world are doing that? And again, this is another example of a major post-pandemic priority for governments. I want to remind everyone that during the pandemic, there are a lot of governments that realized that they have a lot of regrets. They had promised to do broadband infrastructure investment for their entire nations. European countries, for example, Australia, many countries fell far behind their goals in broadband deployment. They didn't anticipate that a pandemic would come and suddenly people would be locked down at home. And those countries that had a high degree of internet penetration are the ones that have had their services industries be more resilient. So it is very important to make this a priority. So what does that mean? Well, deploying those platform technologies that I mentioned earlier in mobility, security, healthcare, water and waste management, energy, and so forth across the board. Well, as you can see, there is an index developed by McKinsey to rank some of these, and you see where countries place. You have 2 cities from the UAE, 2 of the Emirates are here. Abu Dhabi ranks very high in wealth and also quite well in terms of the adaptation score. Dubai is right there and towards the right middle, slightly lower in income per capita, slightly higher in terms of adaptation. Singapore is there on the upper right. So this is a set of metrics, yardsticks, and priorities that I think are absolutely critical for governments moving forward. My final point is to apply this to the broader Arab world. Now, the last decade, we could say, has been a tumultuous time across the region, owing to many factors, geopolitical, domestic. Broadly, we talk about the Arab world as one of the critical, pivotal, post-colonial regions. But now I would say it is moving into a post-colonial phase. In other words, it is the master of its own fate. What can it learn from the experiences of the last decade? What can it learn coming out of the pandemic? What common priorities can it have? And I want to emphasize with this map the role of cities, connectivity, and mobility. The Arab world, the 400 million citizens of the Arab world, have the potential to use infrastructural connectivity to move resources, people, goods around in a more fluid way, really hearkening back to the Arab civilization of previous centuries. And I urge that the governments across the region work hard to bring down those political borders and focus on their functional connectivity. It can be oil and gas pipelines. It can be transfer of water or hydrological infrastructure, water desalination. It can be urbanization projects so that there is more affordable housing. It can be immunity passports and digitizing passports so that Arab citizens can move more freely across each other's borders to work in each other's economies. All of these things must be the priorities for Arab governments moving forward. And no doubt, the burden rests very much on the Gulf Arab countries that have taken the lead in many of these areas. And I hope that in the future, we won't debate the past of colonialism, the ideologies of Arabism, but think about what I call here the Pax Arabia, the Arabian peace. And this is something that will no longer be imposed or offered or guided by any other part of the world, not Europe, not America, not China. It is for Arab governments themselves to step up. And there have been positive stories during this pandemic of Arab countries doing a better than expected and an adequate job of coping with COVID. And it's a sign that that fundamental social resilience and cohesion can be there. So I hope that that is one of the most important lessons that we all take away from this tragic pandemic, that we can all do better and we all have the potential to do better. With that, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Parag, for these insights. And the first question that I wanted to start with is, in your opinion, the trends that you mentioned, how will they shape the next decade, this new reality that we're facing?
Well, let me begin answering that by focusing on the reality of regionalism. And, I didn't emphasize this enough, really, but one of the trends that began prior to the pandemic, really owing to what's been happening in global energy markets, with technology regulation, with the trade war during the Trump administration, is that there is an ever-growing focus on intra-regional consolidation. And you see this with North America, the U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement. You see this with the bailouts and the common fiscal policies being adopted in Europe, in the Eurozone, and the conditionality applied to those bailouts. And you see it in Asia with the ratification of the RCEP trade agreement in November. Now, in the height of this pandemic, we have seen the 3 most important economic centers of the world deepen their regional integration. This is not an accident by any means, Saeed. This is causal. The fact that we have global disruptions in supply chains encourages countries to gravitate more towards their neighbors and to realize that they must deepen those complementarities with their neighbors. We've seen North America do it organically, Europe do it organically, and Asia do it organically. Hence, it brings me back to the Arab world. The solutions for the Arab world are not going to come from the outside at a time when everyone is looking inside.
I definitely agree. And I think this then leads to the next question of what are some changes, sort of low hanging fruits that governments should be able to focus on for 2021?
Oh, I think that's an excellent question. Well, the number one priority, without any doubt, must be support for small and medium enterprises. One of the things that we don't appreciate commonly when we're talking about the big picture economic impact of COVID, GDP shrinking, trade collapsing, and so forth, we forget that the majority of the GDP of most countries is made up of their small and medium enterprises, companies that have less than 100 or less than 1,000 employees, but they make up the majority of the workforce and often the majority of the GDP of many countries. So bailing them out, enabling them to revive their businesses, to pay their workers is such a critical part of actually the health of the country. The actual health of the country may depend on SMEs staying in business, on those companies that do delivery being in business, and having the infrastructure of logistics to deliver vaccines and care for people. A lot of this does depend on small and medium enterprises. And in a way, we can almost distinguish the countries that have done the best versus those that have not, based upon looking at the extent to which they have taken care of their SMEs. And I'll emphasize, Saeed, it's not just a priority for 2021. This has to be the new normal in our fiscal policy.
No, definitely. And I think this leads us to the next question of you've mentioned lessons learned from different governments, in particular with Asia, but even some things that the private sector was able to innovate during this difficult time. So what can governments harness from these lessons learned?
It's another excellent question. And indeed, as you know very well, in the technology sector, many executives have said that they have accelerated deployment of their technologies at a pace that would have been unimaginable without the pandemic. And we've seen this with the deployment of 5G broadband and mobile internet access, things like mesh networks. We've seen this, of course, with platform apps for communication and for sharing of information for businesses, with remote learning for schools, telemedicine in the healthcare sector, in so many ways, mobile payments as well, because cashlessness is also becoming or accelerating as a norm. So these are just some of the ways, just a handful of examples of the accelerated digitization. And of course, governments should massively encourage this trend. Now, this does have to be synchronized with the fact that you have a greater sort of a tendency towards digital nationalization. So that means countries need to have their own stack, their technology stack, their hardware, their software, their platforms, their apps, their service providers, their data security. And the race is on among countries to build that stack. So governments can play a very critical role there. There's only a few countries in the world that are truly autonomous when it comes to their technology stack. Places like China, Japan, South Korea. And we can see the push in India, for example, to move in that direction, and in the United States to move in that direction. And I do believe it is possible for those countries who have their modern banking systems, government support for technology entrepreneurs, and so forth. And I think that will be absolutely a big priority for governments now and in the future.
Absolutely. And I think we only have time for one question. And in your opinion, what is one change that governments should embrace, I think, from lessons from 2020?
I would say that connectivity as an imperative for individuals is the utmost priority, because without that digital connectivity and without mobility, it's very difficult for individuals to maintain their livelihoods. And this is absolutely critical. So digital connectivity has been crucial for children to be able to remain in school and get educated. Something like 75% of the students in the world were unable to go to school for a substantial percentage of the year 2020. And that's obviously gravely unfortunate. So that's one example. The other is, I'll emphasize this also from the earlier answer, and that's mobile payments. We have to rapidly move towards this sort of demonetization, digital money, and so forth. Every individual should be entitled to a mobile bank account, right? And that is going to have such an impact on the ability of governments to disperse subsidies, on people to conduct transactions with each other, and again, to remain afloat in times of significant disruption. So connectivity in every possible sense. And we should be imaginative about what other ways we have not yet empowered individuals with connectivity. You'll find that even some of the wealthiest countries in the world have quite a long way to go. So that connectivity imperative. Again, to close on a positive note, the international connectivity is something that the UAE has done extraordinarily well. Even the domestic connectivity between the Emirates has improved, and there are plans to do even more. Even hyperloops, let's say, between the Emirates. That's another example of connectivity. And then the digital connectivity for individuals, families, workers, again, students, and so forth. All of that can also go one step further. So I am a believer that even though people think of or associate the pandemic with a time of lockdown and breakdown of many of our networks in the world, in many ways, we are setting the stage for the opposite, right? For a flourishing of connectivity, particularly of the digital variety, especially when we don't know when and where we can physically move. So I wanted to highlight that as a silver lining coming out of the pandemic. And in the spirit of your question, really the number one priority for all of us moving forward.
All right. That's all the time we have. Parag, thank you very much. Thank you to all of those that attended today. And thank you to the World Government Summit.